Hey folks, it's Fernando doing another video here for Modern Survivalists, and it's going to be 5 tips so as to be ready for winter storms. I already covered this in a post in my website, The Modern Survivalist, but I didn't do a proper YouTube video on it. So let's get started. Number 1 would be having food, water, medicine, and your other basic supplies. In terms of food, you're looking at food that is shelf stable. It requires no refrigeration and hopefully not a lot of cooking or use of water so as to prepare it. Thinking especially here about canned foods that are already ready to eat. You do have MREs, meals ready to eat, the military type of food. Now it's kind of bulky, kind of expensive, and doesn't always taste as good. I think it's much more efficient, especially for something that's going to be kept at home, to go straight for canned food. I especially like the tuna foils, you know, the metal foils. It lasts almost as long as the cans. It's very light and it doesn't taste as bad as the canned meat. Canned vegetables as well, that's a good way to go about it. You know what, a good idea is having disposable paper plates and cups and cutlery so as to not have to use your ordinary dishes and not be left with a pile of dirty dishes during the middle of a storm. If you're maybe going without electricity, maybe even without water, it's just better to just throw everything away and just forget about it. Also in terms of water, you want to have a few cases of water. The basic guideline is having a gallon of water per person per day. That's basically what you're going to be using up for drinking, for preparing food, and for washing. Now, at least have some water. I would go for at least a gallon per person, at least for a week. And a lot of people tend to think that because there's lots of snow, especially in a winter storm, during a snowstorm, so because of the amount of snow that is available out there, water is not as much of a priority. That's not actually a good idea, because melting snow does require, first of all, going out there and picking it up, which is not much of a pleasant idea, but it also means you're going to be using lots of fuel so as to melt that snow. Also, there may be problems with the supply of water because of burst pipes, which reminds us of making sure our house pipes don't freeze, and at least make sure there's no water in them so as to not expand and bust the pipes. In terms of medical supplies, have enough medicines for any medical condition that you may have. You know, depending on where you are, you may be snowed in for a few days to even a few weeks, depending on how bad the conditions are and how isolated you are. So it's very important to have your medicines for any condition that you may have. This actually reminds me of an article on CNN, someone that died because of not being able to get dialysis that he needed to stay alive because of the storm. He ended up dying because of that. Moving to tip number 2, don't travel if you don't have to. And that's going back to this very common causes of death during winter storms. Accidents, people dying because of car accidents, people dying because of exposure as well. If the car breaks down and you're left in the middle of an intense snowstorm in the middle of winter with temperatures dropping, you are risking a lot. And maybe there's not a need to do that. So whenever possible, if just use your common sense, but also listen to the advice that is being given in your region. Generally, you will have weather alerts, so do pay attention to them. They're being made for a reason in general. Now, in spite of that, maybe sometimes you don't have much of a choice, so make sure here that you have a kit in your vehicle as well. Here we're talking about having some high-calorie food in your vehicle, chocolate, something to keep you warm in terms of blankets, dry clothes. I make sure to have in my car at all times a spare set of clothes for each family member. It has come in handy in more than one occasion because of different reasons, because of something that's spilled on you in a restaurant, or if something happens with one of the kids playing or something like that. Maybe someone gets hurt and clothes get bloody. It's always nice to have a spare set of clothes. Now in cold weather geographic locations where there's more of a risk of that, have specially clothes geared towards extreme temperatures. Here we're talking about having mittens, gloves, and a good amount of blankets as well. Think about maybe having to stay there for a period of time until you have help arrive, or you're able to wait for the following day and then maybe travel. But make sure you have enough supplies so as to bug in your vehicle and not expose yourself to extreme weather conditions. The battery packs for when you have battery problems in your vehicles, for jump starting your vehicle, that can be a lifesaver as well. And of course your cell phone and a charger for your cell phone. You know, this is pretty much common sense, I guess, by now, but you would be surprised by the amount of people that don't keep a phone charger in their vehicle, and suddenly they find themselves in an emergency and they have no battery left in their cell phone. It's no good without it. Number 3, stay warm but stay safe. Yes, and here again, making reference to some of the most common causes of death during winter storms, during snowstorms. People, especially when there's blackouts, trying to stay warm, they start maybe fires indoors, and when you have an open flame indoors, you're using up oxygen. You have the risk of carbon monoxide intoxication and death. This is a pretty real concern. I always recommend having a kerosene heater. The kerosene heater is as simple as it could possibly get in terms of being just a metal box with a wick and just using the kerosene that you have. Now, as good as it is in terms of simplicity and an easy, simple way of keeping you warm, foolproof in many ways, it can be very dangerous if you're in a sealed room and there's no proper ventilation. The kerosene heater has come along with a carbon monoxide detector. As you buy one, get the other one as well. If you're getting one on Amazon or eBay, just buy the carbon monoxide detector as well. If you're getting it from a flea market, make sure that before you get home, you stop at a Home Depot or wherever and you do get one and keep it in the room where you're using the kerosene heater. The same goes for propane heaters as well. Anything that you have a flame, it requires a carbon monoxide detector to be used in that room just as well. Another common cause of death is a house fire, so be particularly careful regarding that. I think it was just this week in CNN, I was reading an article, people dying in fires caused because of open flames, maybe even candles. Lots of reasons why, and people are not used to using these other forms of heating, or maybe using candles for illumination, make mistakes. Fires get started, people end up getting killed because of this. And be smart about it. If you have maybe just one kerosene heater and it's not enough for the entire house, just limit it to a part of the house and close the rest. Now again, make sure you're not sealed in a room with a kerosene heater, but maybe if you're all sleeping in the living room, like in the family room, maybe something like that, a larger room, and there's enough ventilation for that. In general, the rule of thumb says that whenever you're using a kerosene heater, you have to leave a window open, cracked, for 1 inch. You know, an inch of ventilation. That's usually going to be enough. In some other cases, if you have a drafty house, maybe you don't even need that. But again, the best way to be safe about it is having the carbon monoxide detector. Moving forward to number 4, charge and unplug. Yeah, make sure you have your cell phones charged. Make sure you're charging your rechargeable batteries as well. Keep them fully charged, especially the lithium-ion batteries. They can hold a charge for quite some time. The Eneloop batteries, AA, AAA, those last for well over a year without losing more than 10%, maybe 15-20% of its charge. So the low discharge batteries do have a pretty big advantage in this case. If you have one of these battery packs for your cell phone, you know, the ones I've recommended in the past, one of these battery banks for your phones and for other devices. These days, many of these devices don't use that much power. So maybe with a battery pack, you can power your cell phone, a tablet, or even a netbook, and it's enough to get you, you know, maybe in touch, maybe communicate with other people, call for help if it's needed, and keep up with the news. It's a good idea to keep that charged. And one more thing, when power goes out, make sure to unplug everything. When power is restored, there's a good possibility that it may ruin some of your appliances. It doesn't happen all the time, and to be honest, it's not as common, but it does happen. I actually know a guy that had everything burned in his house when power came back. He was in Buenos Aires. The lights had gone down, and when they came back, it came with such a surge that it ruined everything that he had plugged in. It can be pretty expensive, and it's not always easy to get the power company to pay for all of that. Number 5, know the common risks during snowstorms, the more common causes of injury and death. Careful when shoveling snow, careful when going outside, slipping in black ice. Shoveling snow, surprising, but always happens that people end up making more of a physical workout than they're used to. They start shoveling snow. Maybe it's because of the cold conditions. Maybe it's because of the hurry, so as to clear the road and get the car out, maybe go to work or something like that, and they don't realize how much of a physical effort they're doing. And every single year, without a fault, a number of people end up dying shoveling snow because of heart attacks. Slipping in snow happens all the time. Broken bones, broken hips. You know, and this goes back to not going outside unless you have to. But even if you are staying home, there's all these possible risks. There's also the risk of being locked outside if you don't have your keys. And something that happens, I know I've read it a few times, is people dying in conditions that are, you know, just a few yards away from their door. Maybe they go out to take the trash. They didn't tell anyone that they were going outside to take it out. They slip, they fall in the ice, they get hurt, and because of the extreme conditions, the extremely low temperatures, in just a few minutes, people lose consciousness, end up dying. And someone inside, the rest of the family inside the house, they didn't even realize that someone was in need of help just outside the door. So whenever, it doesn't matter if you're walking the dog, or taking the trash out, or just checking out the perimeter, or getting your car inside. Whenever there's a snowstorm or extreme weather conditions and you're going outside, make sure you tell some other family member what you're doing. Make sure someone knows that you're going outside, you're going to be outdoors, and you don't get locked outside or end up injured and without help when needed the most. One more thing. Yeah, I did post this in survivalistsports.com, and it started a pretty good thread. There were several good comments, people chipping in with some advice of their own. When power goes down, shut off water, the drains and the lines to keep them from freezing. Add portable antifreeze to the toilet to keep it from freezing too. And cracking the bowl. That's actually a good one. I haven't seen that before. Stay hydrated. Yeah, being hydrated is important because it helps you fight the cold temperatures much better. Have a plan for nature's call. So there were lots of good advice. And someone finally said, where is it? Keep fully charged portable jump starter, battery pack. And here it is. Someone finally said, and this, I thought it was pretty interesting. He said, by far the best answer is not to live in such an area. Or if you do and shit hits the fan, get out. Well, maybe that's not as practical, but it's actually a good point of not living in such an area. You're not going to be just deciding on this, but it's an important factor, especially if you are going to be moving around and considering some of the best places to live. Regardless of the dangers of enemies and movement, the risk of moving where it's warmer will be less than that cold, without modern conveniences and with the risk of enemies seeing your smoke, hearing your chainsaw, etc. Yeah, I'm not really worried about enemies seeing your smoke and such, but it's actually a good point about keeping this into the equation as well. Whenever you're choosing where you're living, if you're going to be living in a place that has extreme weather conditions, maybe take that into account, not just undecided, I guess, moving into that place, but maybe living closer to where help is available. Or, if you're going to be keeping this in mind, it's much better to plan for if you understand the potential risk of it. And someone replies, and here is where I see the huge fail of logic. Someone replies to this message by saying, I'll take the cold over a more highly populated, warmer area. Cold will drive most people south, including most of the bad elements. They will follow the crowd and the wealth. I don't know what he means by the wealth, but logic fail in terms of you're not going to be living in a warm, more mild climate, and you are going to be living in a more challenging climate, and you're going to be thinking of that as an advantage because of the rare case of, I don't know what happening, and the crowds, I suppose this is going to be the typical horde of looters leaving the cities, and because of the cold temperature they're going to be freezing or something like that. Makes no sense whatsoever. And this is the kind of thing that I see often, the splitting of hairs, the nitpicking fantasies to an extreme where you are going against logic and common sense. If you are looking at this from the perspective of the advantages and disadvantages of extreme weather conditions, by all accounts, there's no question whatsoever, you're much better off in a place that doesn't have such extreme cold winters. That's never an advantage. It's always a disadvantage. Now, maybe you live in an area that has other pros or things going for it, and that are outweighing the disadvantage of the extreme cold weather conditions. Sure, that may be the case, absolutely, and it will depend on each individual situation. But thinking that extreme cold winters would be an advantage for when hordes of looters come over the city, that makes no sense whatsoever. So, keep that in mind. Don't start nitpicking reality and falling for unrealistic logics. Guys, that's going to be all for now. Take care. As always, my books are available below, the Modern Survival Manual and Bugging Out and Relocating, which is Bugging Out and Relocating is going to be giving you a good idea of what is a realistic, sane, and sensible strategic analysis of where you're better off living. Guys, take care. See you in our next video.